You've felt it yourself, that quiet, gnawing frustration. And every time a conversation with a woman slips through your fingers, every time you sense distance where there should be closeness, you analyze her words, replay the moments, anticipate the next interaction. But no matter how hard you try, something remains just out of reach. It's not that you lack intelligence, charm, or effort. It's not a deficiency in looks or social skill. What you fail to see is that your very strength, your depth of thought, your capacity for introspection, is the same thing quietly sabotaging your connection. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, devoted his life to uncovering the invisible patterns in the human mind. And among these patterns is a truth few recognize. Deep thinkers often struggle in love, not because of external factors, but because of the invisible barriers they build within themselves. Think of yourself as a man who has always valued clarity, precision, and insight. Your mind is a complex landscape where every detail matters, every emotion is dissected, and every possibility is considered. You are deliberate, meticulous, and perceptive. On paper, this should make you irresistible. After all, who would not value a man capable of seeing the world in layers, understanding nuance, and appreciating complexity? And yet the reality is different. You notice subtle withdrawal, a lack of warmth, a hesitation in her voice that you cannot explain. You replay the moments in your mind, overanalyzing every expression, every inflection. The more you think, the less she feels. The more you prepare, the more the natural flow escapes. And in that gap, attraction withers. Jung observed that our deepest psychological patterns are not always conscious. You might believe that thinking deeply, preparing meticulously, and analyzing relentlessly is a path to connection. But what you fail to realize is that in relationships, the mind alone cannot bridge the gap. Women unconsciously sense patterns of hesitation, overcaution, and the subtle tension born of overthinking. It is not malevolence on her part, it is instinct. Humans are wired to detect the harmony between confidence and emotional steadiness. When your depth of thought manifests as hesitation, indecision, or self-conscious energy, it disrupts the unconscious signals of security that attraction requires. Your mind becomes a double-edged sword, brilliant internally, yet disruptive externally. Consider the archetypal man who embodies this struggle. He plans meticulously, studies behavioral patterns, and prepares every word he intends to speak. He notices her subtle cues and attempts to respond with precision. He believes that if he gets it right, she will respond with warmth, admiration, and interest. Yet time and again, the outcomes fall short. She smiles politely, nods, engages superficially, and slowly retreats. Each perceived failure compounds, feeding an internal narrative of inadequacy, frustration, and doubt. In truth, the very act of overthinking erodes the natural magnetism he possesses. Jung would call this a conflict between the conscious mind, which seeks perfection and control, and the unconscious, which governs instinct, spontaneity, and subtle emotional resonance. And there is more. Deep thinkers are often prone to emotional isolation, a subtle withdrawal born of habit rather than intent. You retreat into your mind because it feels safer than risking vulnerability, yet this withdrawal sends signals of distance to those you wish to connect with most. Women notice this, not as a conscious judgment, but as a subtle intuition. The man before her is brilliant, but something essential feels absent. He is simultaneously present and absent, available yet detached, interested yet restrained. The tension created by this unconscious conflict creates attraction, but not the kind that sustains connection. It generates curiosity, fleeting intrigue, and sometimes admiration, but rarely emotional intimacy. At the same time, overanalysis creates what Jung might describe as a rigidity in perception. You interpret her words according to countless hypothetical scenarios, attempting to anticipate every reaction. Every smile, every pause, every inflection becomes a puzzle to solve rather than a moment to experience. This rigidity manifests subtly in your energy, in micro-expressions, in slight hesitation. Even the most subtle cues are registered unconsciously by the women around you, and though she may not articulate it, her attraction fluctuates not because of your intelligence, but because your brilliance is filtered through a lens of caution and self-doubt. You may ask yourself, if depth is my strength, why does it feel like a weakness? The answer lies in balance. Depth, insight, and introspection are invaluable traits. Yet in the context of attraction and love, they require translation into presence, decisiveness, and emotional steadiness. Your mind sees endlessly, anticipates endlessly, critiques endlessly, but love is experienced in resonance, not analysis. Every moment spent dissecting her words is a moment lost in genuine engagement. Every hesitation is a signal she subconsciously interprets as uncertainty. And the cumulative effect is what Jung recognized as a silent, persistent struggle. Your very intelligence, your very depth, becomes a barrier to the connection you desire most. By now, you may feel a mixture of recognition and unease. You see yourself in these patterns. You feel the tension between your internal brilliance and the external outcomes in relationships. You recognize the subtle signals you have been sending without realizing it. And this is precisely the moment where transformation begins. Awareness alone is the first step. Understanding why deep thinkers struggle in love does not just explain past failures, it illuminates the path forward. Yet before we explore the solution, you must confront the stark reality. The habits you believe are strengths may be the exact forces holding you back. The depth of your mind is immense, but unless harnessed with emotional clarity and presence, it will continue to undermine the very connections you crave. And here lies the first unsettling truth. Thinking more does not make you more attractive. In fact, it often produces the opposite effect. The careful planning, the mental rehearsal, the endless analysis, these are not neutral acts. They subtly shape your behavior, tone, energy, and presence. Women do not respond to your reasoning alone. They respond to the energy you carry, the quiet confidence you exude, the emotional steadiness beneath your intellect. Jung's insight is not merely theoretical, it is profoundly practical. It warns that brilliance without balance can become invisible, or worse, repellent, in the arena of love. So what is the first step toward breaking this pattern? You cannot change the depth of your mind, that is intrinsic, but you can change how it manifests. You can learn to align your thinking with presence, to let your intellect inform your action without overpowering it, to cultivate a calm confidence that signals both depth and approachability. In the next segment, we will uncover the hidden psychological patterns that cause these struggles, revealing why deep thinkers are often misunderstood and how subtle shifts in perception can transform the way women respond. This is where insight meets strategy, where awareness becomes leverage, and it is here, in the careful recognition of your own patterns, that the path forward begins. You may have recognized the struggle, the quiet tension in your interactions, and now the question arises, why does this happen so consistently? What underlies the invisible force that prevents your depth of thought from translating into genuine connection? Carl Jung provides the lens necessary to understand the patterns you cannot see, patterns that shape perception, influence attraction, and govern your success in love more than conscious effort ever could. It is not merely circumstance or chance, it is psychology at work, a subtle choreography of mind and emotion that occurs beneath awareness. The first hidden pattern is the overvaluation of intellect over instinct. You prize analysis, logic, and understanding above all else. Every word, every expression, every reaction is catalogued, dissected, and assigned meaning. In isolation, this is a strength. It allows you to navigate complex situations, understand motives, and anticipate outcomes. Yet in relationships, over-reliance on intellect can act as a barrier rather than a bridge. Jung observed that the conscious mind, while powerful, cannot replace the unconscious mechanisms that govern social resonance. Women, like all humans, are highly attuned to subtle emotional signals. When your intellect overrides instinct, when your mind dominates your behavior, you disrupt the natural flow of emotional communication. The result is subtle dissonance. You appear thoughtful yet distant, present yet restrained, interested yet hesitant. Next is the pattern of emotional containment. Deep thinkers often hold back not out of disinterest, but from a habitual caution that protects vulnerability. You have likely internalized the notion that showing too much, too soon, risks exposure or loss of control. This instinct is protective, born from repeated experience and reinforced by your own analytical mind. Yet this very containment sends unconscious signals of distance. Women sense it immediately. It is not overt. It is a vibration, a tone, a cadence in your energy that signals hesitation. Jung would describe this as a conflict between the ego's desire for control and the unconscious need for genuine connection. The more you contain, the less you resonate emotionally, and the less responsive she becomes to your depth. A third pattern is anticipatory projection. You constantly simulate possible outcomes, predicting reactions, analyzing potential missteps, and attempting to preempt rejection. This projection is a mental rehearsal of every scenario, every contingency. It is not conscious deception, it is the natural extension of deep cognition. Yet every moment spent in anticipation is a moment disengaged from present experience. Women detect this disengagement subtly, not in words, but in energy. Your mind may be fully engaged, but your presence is fractured. The unconscious registers your attention split between reality and hypothetical outcomes. Attraction thrives in authenticity, spontaneity, and presence, qualities that are eroded by the overactive projection of what might be. The fourth pattern involves perfectionism in communication. Deep thinkers often seek the precise word, the perfect tone, the ideal expression to convey meaning. Each interaction becomes a calculated performance rather than a natural exchange. While this can make you articulate and persuasive, it also slows responsiveness and diminishes fluidity. Jung emphasized that human connection is mediated through unconscious cues, gestures, micro-expressions, tone of voice, timing. Over-calculation interferes with these cues, creating subtle friction. Women may perceive this as hesitation, formality, or even a lack of emotional spontaneity. The brilliance of your mind, filtered through perfectionism, paradoxically dilutes its attractiveness. The fifth hidden pattern is the projection of internal conflict. Your deep thinking often uncovers inconsistencies, insecurities, and conflicts within yourself. You process these internally, attempting resolution before external expression. However, unresolved internal conflict leaks into behavior, posture, tone, and energy. Jung explained that unresolved unconscious content manifests externally in ways invisible to you, but palpable to others. Women may unconsciously sense tension, indecision, or inner struggle, even if you believe you are composed. This is why men of great intellect sometimes appear enigmatic or elusive. Their inner depth creates an outward energy that, without alignment, produces distance rather than attraction. Self-reflection becomes essential here. Ask yourself, in your last meaningful interaction, were you fully present, or were you dissecting, anticipating, and controlling? Were you responding to reality or to a mental projection of potential outcomes? Did your words flow naturally, or were they carefully weighed in the mind before delivery? The patterns Jung identifies are subtle because they operate beneath conscious thought, yet their impact is undeniable. They shape attraction, influence perception, and govern relational dynamics in ways few men recognize. Another layer emerges in emotional transparency versus guardedness. Deep thinkers tend to signal intellectual competence and emotional depth while unconsciously masking vulnerability. While this may protect against perceived risk, it simultaneously communicates distance. Women are unconsciously drawn to men who display alignment between intellect and emotion, thought and feeling, analysis and presence. When this alignment is absent, curiosity may be piqued initially, but sustained interest diminishes. Jung argued that individuation, the process of integrating conscious and unconscious elements, creates the harmony necessary for authentic connection. Without it, your mind remains brilliant, but your relational energy fragmented. Finally, there is the pattern of misaligned timing. Deep thinkers often operate on a temporal plane distinct from spontaneous interaction. You analyze past moments, anticipate future possibilities, and attempt to orchestrate the present. In doing so, you risk missing the rhythm of relational dynamics. Connection requires synchronicity, timing, pace, and responsiveness that cannot be entirely calculated. Jungian insight teaches that attunement to unconscious cues, facial expressions, pauses, subtle gestures, is as important as deliberate communication. Overthinking disrupts this attunement, creating an imperceptible gap between your intent and her perception. Recognizing these patterns is not merely diagnostic, it is preparatory. Awareness illuminates the blind spots where your intellect, depth, and introspection, untempered by emotional clarity and presence, interfere with attraction. Jung's framework is not prescriptive in a superficial sense. It is a map of the unconscious forces at play. It allows you to observe, analyze, and ultimately integrate your internal processes so that they no longer obstruct connection, but enhance it. The challenge is to translate deep cognition into fluid presence, to allow intellect and emotion to coexist harmoniously, and to recognize that subtle shifts in energy, timing, and expression profoundly influence perception. By understanding these hidden patterns, you begin to see the invisible architecture of relational dynamics. You perceive why the very qualities you pride yourself upon, depth, insight, reflection, can paradoxically create barriers. And you prepare for the next stage, the transformative shift. Here, awareness becomes strategy, and strategy becomes lived practice. In the final segment, you will discover the specific changes in mindset and behavior that allow deep thinkers to transform their relational energy, reclaim presence, and align intellect with attraction. This is where comprehension turns into impact, and it is only by confronting these hidden patterns fully and soberly that you can move from struggle to mastery in love. You have seen the invisible barriers, the subtle patterns that have quietly dictated your success in love. You have observed how overthinking, emotional containment, anticipatory projection, perfectionism, internal conflict, and misaligned timing have undermined your depth. Now the question is, how do you transform these challenges into strength? How do you convert intellect into presence, reflection into resonance, and deep thinking into a force that draws rather than repels? The answer lies not in becoming someone else, nor in discarding your depth, but in aligning your mind, emotion, and behavior so that they function as a unified, magnetic whole. The first transformative principle is emotional calibration. You must learn to monitor your inner state without letting it dominate your presence. This does not mean suppressing thought or feeling. It means choosing which aspects of your cognition and emotion are expressed in the moment. When you are aware of your depth, yet grounded in calm confidence, your intellect becomes attractive rather than intimidating. Women respond to men who carry clarity and emotional steadiness beneath their thoughts. This requires conscious practice. In every interaction, You observe the tension between your internal analysis and your external presence, allowing awareness to guide subtle adjustments in tone, body language, and timing. It is not manipulation, it is mastery of self-expression. The second principle is strategic spontaneity. You must learn to think deeply while acting lightly. Deep thinkers often become trapped in internal rehearsal, projecting outcomes and weighing possibilities endlessly. The shift is to channel this foresight into fluidity rather than rigidity. You allow insight to inform instinct, creating moments that appear effortless, genuine, and resonant. A woman perceives this harmony immediately. She senses that while you possess depth, you are not enslaved to your thoughts. Your actions flow naturally, your words land without over-explanation, and your energy communicates intelligence without hesitation. Jung described this as integration, the conscious and unconscious operating in alignment, producing presence that is both compelling and authentic. Third, embrace decisive vulnerability. Deep thinkers often hide behind subtle caution, fearing missteps or exposure. Transformation requires showing depth in ways that invite connection without over-analysis. Vulnerability is not confession. It is the controlled disclosure of authentic thought and feeling. When you share a considered insight, a genuine observation, or a quietly expressed emotion, it communicates courage, depth, and accessibility simultaneously. Women perceive this alignment as magnetic. You are a man who thinks profoundly but engages without fear. Your mind is a fortress, yet it opens selectively to create connection. Jung would identify this as conscious individuation, choosing which inner contents to express and which to integrate internally. Fourth, develop temporal attunement. Deep thinkers often operate on a different rhythm than the flow of interaction. Transformation requires attuning to the subtle pacing of connection, when to speak, when to pause, how to mirror energy without mimicking. This is not learned through logic alone, it is honed through attention, observation, and reflection. By synchronizing your timing with natural rhythms, your intellect becomes invisible in its elegance, allowing attraction to flourish organically. She will feel your depth without being aware of its complexity. Presence becomes your medium. Intelligence becomes your signature. Fifth, cultivate perceptive minimalism. Your depth allows you to notice everything, but not everything should be expressed. Selective expression amplifies impact. A single, carefully placed observation, a measured insight, or a quietly delivered truth carries far more weight than relentless analysis. Jung noted that the unconscious responds more to resonance than quantity. By reducing clutter and emphasizing quality, your intellect communicates subtly yet powerfully. This produces curiosity, engagement, and sustained attention. Women sense the power in restraint. You demonstrate that depth need not dominate. It can illuminate without overwhelming. Finally, integrate feedback loops of self-awareness. Transformation is iterative. You observe interactions, note patterns, adjust internal calibration, and test subtle shifts. Each encounter becomes both experiment and lesson. Deep thinkers excel when they treat social engagement not as performance, but as reflective practice. Jungian integration here is critical. Your unconscious tendencies, once obstacles, now serve as instruments for intentional presence. You measure success not in external validation alone, but in alignment between thought, feeling, and action. Over time, the synthesis of intellect, emotion, and behavior creates a magnetic coherence. You become a man whose depth invites rather than intimidates, whose intellect informs rather than overshadows, and whose presence resonates across conscious and unconscious channels. You will notice subtle shifts immediately. Women begin to sense steadiness, clarity, and quiet confidence. Curiosity is no longer fleeting, it lingers, interest deepens, conversations flow with both depth and lightness. Yet this is not magic. It is the disciplined practice of alignment, self-observation, and subtle application of psychological insight. Jung's principles provide the map, but mastery emerges through consistent attention and purposeful adaptation. You have already recognized the patterns that limit connection. Now you are equipped to reshape them into forces that enhance attraction, presence, and relational resonance. The culmination of these transformations is profound. Your depth no longer isolates, it attracts. Your intellect is no longer a barrier, it is a bridge. Emotional steadiness and presence allow your thoughts to shine naturally, creating a magnetic coherence that is sensed, not calculated. Women feel this alignment instinctively. They perceive not just a man who thinks, but a man who embodies thought, emotion, and presence as one integrated whole. The struggle that once defined your interactions dissolves into mastery, subtle yet unmistakable. Your mind is still deep, but now it moves through the world with gravity and grace, shaping perception without forcing it. And yet, this transformation is only the beginning. Awareness without continual refinement risks regression. Mastery without reflection is fragile. The final stage is sustained application, observing, integrating, adjusting, and allowing your depth to interact fluidly with each new context. By applying these shifts consistently, you internalize attraction as an emergent property of your alignment, rather than as a product of external effort. The deep thinker who once struggled now operates from presence, steadiness, and subtlety. A man whose depth draws curiosity, fosters intimacy, and commands attention without effort. This is your path, to move from struggle to coherence, from invisible brilliance to magnetic presence, from overthinking to strategic integration. By mastering emotional calibration, strategic spontaneity, decisive vulnerability, temporal attunement, perceptive minimalism, and iterative self-awareness, you convert depth into connection, thought into resonance, and analysis into presence. The struggle of deep thinkers in love is not destiny. It is a challenge to be observed, understood, and transcended. The choice is now yours. The path forward is illuminated by insight and sharpened by deliberate practice, and the result is a man whose depth is no longer a burden, but a force that shapes perception, attracts curiosity, and fosters meaningful, lasting connection.